Hey guys, Dr. Plague here. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for tuning in for part 4 of Christopher Smoke Cooper's Sleeping to Be Awake, The Understanding. This is part 4, but it's part 2 of book 2, so if you're not caught up, go ahead and go back and watch my previous videos and get caught up. That being said, I hope you enjoy. I got to my friend John's house. It looked like it was abandoned. Walking up to the door, I realized there was an eviction notice. I wondered what could have possibly happened. No sign of anyone in the house, so I said to myself, I might as well go to my cousin's house. I mean, he's only the next house over. That's when I saw Melissa. God, she's more beautiful than I remembered. Hey, Chris, what you up to today, sexy? I looked around to assure myself that I was prepared to do the nasty. Well, I'm not up to much. By any chance, you know what happened to John? She looked sad. Chris, 2 years ago he murdered his entire family, but not before raping his mom and little sister and forcing his dad to watch. It was the worst year of our lives. You don't remember all the counseling we had to go through to be a tiny bit stable again? I shook my head in disbelief. This can't be true. He was totally against violence ever since his cousin died in the Columbine massacre. Well, what happened to him? She started crying. Chris, I don't really want to talk about that, okay? I nodded my head. We walked down to the end of the block and she turned to me and said, Want to have a little fun? She started unbuttoning her shirt in a sexy way. I looked around nervously. Yeah, I could use it right now. She smiled and grabbed me. You sure? I nodded. You sure you want to cheat on your wife? She started laughing in a deeper tone. What the fuck is going on here? Every fucking time I get close to having fun, it gets ruined. She started changing into Raphael. Great, another demon I gotta deal with. Perfect. Isn't this what you wanted, Chris? A nice young blonde to fuck as your wife fucked you? He started laughing again. Fuck this. I went to punch him and he vanished. But I still heard the laughing. I'll be back, Chris. Have fun. The laughing continued. Well, Melissa's gone. What to do now? Looking around, I happened to see my cousin with a Walkman and headphones on, trying to rap to a song. Shit, I miss these days. Hey, cuz, what you up to? He's still rapping and fumbling his words, getting mad as he does it. So I tap him on the shoulder and he swings around, ready to fight. Seeing my face, though, he begins to laugh. Well, look at this fool. What do we have here, cuz? I looked at him and shook my head. Well, a lot is going on, and I don't know what to do, but fuck it. What's up with you right now? He smiled. Just getting up my rap game is all. Looking at him while laughing. You want to be Eminem? Come on, let's go home. We'll play some Halo. After that sentence, I blacked out with no reason behind it. Why does this always happen when I start to get my feet planted in reality? I get thrown in and what the fuck? I think he might be coming to. Give him some room. Started opening one eye to see who was around me. Once it opened, slowly, I began to see, although it was blurry, what looked like a hospital setting. You okay, Chris? Can you hear me? I sat up on a hospital bed. I was looking around, nodding my head a little bit, answering questions. Are you able to speak? I'm thinking, why am I getting asked these questions? Am I here because I almost died? Well, I'm fine. What happened to me anyway? The doctor looked at me in a sad fashion. Well, your wife and you were traveling from Sarasota back to New York on the I-95 when a tractor-trailer swerved into your lane and, well, I looked around in disbelief. Why the fuck does this continue to happen to me when all I want is an easygoing experience with all this shit? Honestly, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, my wife was a slut who slept around and didn't think twice about me or the consequences of her action. But it's okay. I'll move on. So what you're telling me is He nodded his head. I'm sorry, Chris. She passed. We thought the same for you for a bit, but you pulled through remarkably, as if nothing ever happened to you. The room felt like it was shaking. like an earthquake was happening. The windows rattled, doors seemed to open and shut, and the people around me acted as if nothing was going on. So, Doc, what you're saying is, I'm free? The doctor looked at me, shocked, and shook his head in disappointment. Chris, you must still be in shock. Your wife is dead. Do you understand that? Smiling, I shook my head and said, yeah, I understand. But am I free now? The doctor, with his jaw on the floor, responded, in what way are you referring to being free? I chuckled and looked him in the eye and said, you know damn well what I'm referring to. He looked astonished. I started getting up and he called the nurse and the guards to restrain me back to bed. He looked at me, Chris, you're too messed up from the accident to just get up and go. Please, just stay. We have these medications that will help you help you feel better. Okay, so it's clear now that this is still my alternative state of mind. The question here is to figure out how to get out of this predicament without alerting them that I know. I surveyed the room to make sure I'd find a safe way out of here. There was a door semi-open to the right of my bed. If I was to say yes to the medication he had, and then dart out of the room when he goes to get it. Okay, at least go grab me some Xanax for my anxiety, please. Or something? He smiled. So, you're staying? I nodded my head. Great, I'll go get you something to calm you down. I looked him in his eye after he said that, and it looked as though he had no soul in his body. It was disturbing, to say the least. The way he was thrilled about me staying wasn't like that of someone who cared that I got help, but almost that of a person who had a secret agenda and was relieved that I was going about it so smoothly. He started walking to go grab the medication. I waited until I couldn't hear him in the room any longer. I started to get off the bed and make my way to the door. Chris, what are you doing out of bed? Trying to sneak off somewhere like, I don't know, maybe out of the hospital? I looked shocked like, wow, they really have a fucking eye on me, don't they? Smiling, I said, no, just looking for a bathroom is all. He grunted, yeah, right, bathroom. I got up a little bit and asked, so where is the bathroom? Oh, don't worry, I'll have someone take you. Give me 1 second. He turned around and I thought it was now or never. I have to get the fuck out of here. Got myself fully off on the ground and darted for the door. Behind me were what looked like nurses turning into guards. In front of me, I saw a glimmering light and said, I have to make it to that and I'll be fine. Running with all my might and every ounce of energy that I had left in me, I made it, and then everything went red, and then to dark black. Fuck. Where am I now? Chris, are you really awake? It was my sister's voice. I'm not sure what's going on right now. I have all these mixed emotions going on. I look at her sitting in a chair. Looks as if I'm in the hospital. She looked at me and then just leapt and gave me a hug like it had been years since she had seen me or something. After what felt like forever, I finally got her off of me. What the fuck happened to me? She looked down at the ground and had this horrified look on her face. She sat back in her seat and said with tears straining down her cheeks, on your 19th birthday, you went out with some friends. You bought some Coke and Oxycontin and, well, you overdosed. They tried to resuscitate you, which they kinda did, but you went into a coma for 3 years and now you're back. That's something I was not expecting to hear. We glanced at each other, and I said, well, sis, I have a lot to tell you from everything I had just went through. This whole experience. She looked at me and laughed while still having tears streaming down her cheeks. Let's get the doctor in here and see when we can get you home. She sat up with a smile and walked out of the room. Looking around the room, everything seemed to be normal. There were no signs of it being a trick or anything. Nothing looked out of place like all the other times I went to the random events. Is this it? Am I finally done with this whole game that I've been constantly going through with No end in sight. I sighed with relief, knowing that this might actually be the real world for once. Maybe it's really over. Does that mean the people who said they were my dad are fake? Was Justin just a fictional character I created in that state and felt like I knew my entire life? All these questions are messing with my mind at this point. It's getting hard to come to grips with reality since I went through so many different realities. The doctor finally came in with a surprised look on his face, as if he was seeing something impossible. One of the doctors looked me up and down and said, "Well, Chris, I'm Dr. Brennan. How are you feeling right now?" I grinned and said, "Well, now that you mention it, a beer wouldn't be half bad." The room began to fill with laughter. Dr. Brennan looked at me. "Chris, we'll run some tests, probably have you out here by tomorrow evening if everything checks back okay. Sound like a plan?" I smiled and said with a sigh of relief, "Yeah, Doc, that sounds perfect. You don't know what kind of hell I've been through." He smiled. "Alrighty, well, let's get started on the test, shall we?" I nodded my head. That day and night, they did a hell of a lot of tests on me. The sun rose and I was still wide awake. I saw my sister and Dr. Brennan walking into the room with smiles across both their faces. My sister came up to me and said, "Chris, all your tests came back great. Are you ready to go home?" I looked at her and burst into tears. "I've been ready to go home for 3 years, sis." I got up and hugged her. Dr. Brennan left the room. "Chris, I'm going to go get your stuff and some new clothes for you, okay?" I nodded my head. She left the room and I sat there pondering if this really was all over. I feel a sense of relief this time around that I haven't felt in a long time. She came back into the room and had a duffel bag with some new clothes for me. I closed the curtains and began to get changed. This was all so unreal. I pulled open the curtain and my sister hugged me again. "I've waited a long time to see you up and around. You ready?" I nodded my head and we started to walk towards the door. We made our way downstairs and outside of the parking lot. My sister fumbled to find her keys in her purse. She found her keys and hit the alarm button so we could find the car. She looked around and we heard a car and finally found it. We made our way over to the car. "Chris, I'll race you to the car." I ran with all my might, but my sister managed to get ahead of me and beat me to it. I jumped into the passenger seat and she got in and started it up. She looked at me. "So, you ready to go home?" I looked at her and said, "You damn right I am." We began driving to our parents' house. Along the way, I looked out the window to see what had changed. There were a couple of new buildings, some new businesses. We made it to our parents and parked the car in the driveway. I looked at my sister and said, "Do they know I came out of my coma?" She shook her head. "I haven't had a chance to tell them yet." I sat there thinking that I'm going to give my parents a heart attack. How do I approach them without shocking them? I got out of the car and looked around the house. My sister looked at me and I said, "By the way, whatever happened to my apartment?" She looked down. "Mom and Dad got rid of it because you went into the coma." I opened the front door and it felt great to be able to do that. We both started walking upstairs to where the living room was on the second floor. I could hear my parents watching TV and messing around with each other, calling each other names and such. We both walked into the living room and both my parents were still watching TV. I looked at my mom and dad and said, "Mom, Dad, I'm home." They stared at me and had this look like they'd seen the dead walking. My mom got up and ran to give me a hug, but she almost tackled me. We were holding each other while she was sobbing uncontrollably. I held her tight and whispered, "I love you, Mom." I thought about the family throughout this whole thing. She backed up and looked at me as this smile started to form across her face. "Welcome home, son." My dad got up and came towards me. We all had a family group hug real quick, and it felt amazing to be with the family and not having to worry about different things that could happen. We talked for hours, and I told them everything that I went through while I was in a coma. We laughed at some of it, while other times we cried, and they sat there listening to support me. After some time, my mom showed me to my old room. They had just redone my room in case I came out of my coma. They had hoped that, just like my sister, I would one day. I got up to my room and opened the door. So many memories in this room, from where I was a kid playing video games online with other people and being a brat. I walked into the room and just laid on my bed for a little bit on my back, staring at the ceiling and wondering what's real and what's not. An hour went by, and I just decided to watch some TV and get my mind off everything. I turned to Cartoon Network to watch Adult Swim to see what was on. It was Venture Brothers, so I turned to it. I snuggled myself in bed and started to doze off. I was a little scared, thinking this was just another trick that was going to make me wake up to another reality. More and more, my eyes got heavier, and I began to fall asleep. I woke up, and I was still in my parents' house in my old bedroom. This was unreal. I was finally free from that horrible reoccurring nightmare. Rolling out of bed, I got some new clothes on and started to head downstairs. I heard my mom in the kitchen, so I made my way there. She looked at me while making some scrambled eggs and said, "What would you like for breakfast?" I thought about it for a little bit and said, "I'll take 2 eggs over easy and 3 pancakes with syrup, please." She nodded her head and laughed. "You got it." I sat down at the table with a plate and a fork. She finished covering up everything and put it on a plate. "Let me know how everything is." I started eating, and I mumbled, "It's delicious." After I had finished breakfast, I got up to put my dishes in the sink. As I did that, I heard a crash come from upstairs. My mom looked at me. "Your father. Can you go check on him?" I raced up the stairs and found my dad on the floor. Going towards him, he yelled out, "I'm fine. I was just cleaning out my closet and fell off the ladder." I looked at my dad while laughing. "Okay, I'll just be downstairs if you need me." I ran back downstairs to let my mom know what had happened. I made my way to the living room since I had heard noises coming from there. It was my sister and my mom just watching some TV and talking. My mom looked at me and said, "So what happened?" I only heard him yelling. Couldn't make out what he was saying. I shook my head. "He was cleaning and fell off a ladder." She laughed. "Well, that's your father." I smirked and shook my head. "Yeah, I guess he is." I sat down on the couch and watched some television with my sister and mom. We sat there for the next hour or so, talking, waiting for my dad to come downstairs. He finally came downstairs and looked at all of us. "What are you guys up to?" We all looked at each other and then back at him. My sister looked at him with a face of laughter. "Waiting for you to get off the floor." We all started laughing again. "Yeah, real funny, guys." My mom went back into the kitchen and started whipping up some dinner. We had dinner and ended the night watching the new Batman movie on the video stick they had. I went up to my bedroom and thought this was all too amazing. I went through all these trials and just ended up back here at my house. Everything normal. It was a blessing. I fell asleep that night with a sense of relief, knowing it was finally over. So I woke up the next morning and continued my life. For the next couple of years, it was extremely hard to get used to the fact that I would wake up in the same reality every day. I'm still scared at night sometimes that I won't wake up in this reality. It keeps me awake sometimes. I don't want to ever leave this world again. It doesn't matter to me if this is created by them, because this is the best thing I could have ever asked for. To finally be with my family again. I don't know if this journey I've been on, if this is what it's all for. However long it really was going on. I don't even know if it really means anything. I will say this, that it's made me appreciate my family more and to be around them as much as possible. After 6 years from the first night I got back, my father passed away in his sleep. I regret that I ever got into that coma. It was a stupid mistake. I don't regret all the time I spent with my dad in those last years. He was an amazing father and a great dad, and I just wish I had more time to spend with him. When I was in a coma, I had delusions of me never having a dad at all. I'm not sure after all this that I ever really did have a father, but he felt like my father, and that's why I love spending every minute with him. He taught me things no one else could. I thank him for all the help and success he gave me in life every day. About 5 years after Dad passed, my mom passed away as well. From childhood, I was always attached to her hip. I loved that woman to death. She was my role model growing up. I may not have treated her with respect all the time, but I did respect that woman, and I would have done anything she would have asked of me. After my father passed, we got closer, and I started to take care of her since my father was gone. I remember the night she passed. That night we were watching one of our favorite shows, Big Bang Theory. She asked me to make her some tea, and I went down to get everything ready. I made her a cup, and went upstairs and walked into her room, but I noticed her eyes were shut. I didn't see her breathing, and I walked over and hugged her. I said, "Mom, I love you. I always will. I know you and Dad are watching over me and Amanda now." I called 911, then my sister. She died from natural causes. I'm saddened by her death, but I was happy to know I was there to take care of her in her last hours. I miss her every day. It's been 2 years since she passed. Amanda and I see each other almost every day now. She has a kid, and she's about the best thing in my world. I'm sad my parents didn't get to see my niece, but they would have loved their little granddaughter, and I know she would have loved them too. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for coming to my reading tonight. I hope you've enjoyed hearing Sleeping to Be Awake, a 2-part series by Christopher Smoked Cougar. If you'd like to get your own copy, they're available on Amazon. I believe he has a 2-book deal for less than $10. I own both of them myself, and it's a great read and a real steal. Time once again to thank my patrons. Thanks to Leslie Lou Riddle for pledging $5 at our Spooky Skeleton tier. That's our $5 tier for those of you not in the know. If you'd like to have your name read at the end of all my stories, you can go to Patreon and pledge $5 to our Spooky Skeleton tier. We appreciate everyone who supports the channel, even if you just support by watching this show. And as always, Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.